The NBA has gone through its fair share of eras that are usually broken up by decade. The 80s, 90s, 2000s, and 2010s all had one or two teams that featured legendary players dominate the league and cement their squads as a dynasty. But what is the 2020s going to be remembered for? It's crazy to think about, but we're approaching the halfway mark through this decade, and there hasn't been a single team or player that has truly made it their own yet. And that's exactly what I've been waiting for. Not too long ago, there was a time where no matter what happened night in and night out, we knew exactly who was going to come out of the East and West, which made things so much less enjoyable. But this year, I feel like every night there's at least one or two games that is not only highly entertaining, but important as well. Whether it's a heated rivalry, record-breaking performances, or a matchup with seeding implications, there is just so much amazing basketball being played right now on a nightly basis that I think the NBA is pretty much perfect right now. Let's dive in and see how we reach this new golden era of basketball. Before we get started, I just want to say thank you to new and returning viewers for tuning in. If this is your first time coming across my channel and you're a fan of the NBA, please consider subscribing. We talk about a bunch of fun and random topics surrounding the basketball world, so if that's what you're into, then this is the perfect channel for you. Also be sure to hit that like button. And with that out of the way, let's get into the video. The first and most obvious factor in the league being so fun right now starts with the fact that there aren't any super teams. It began with the big three in Miami and was maximized in Golden State, but having a bunch of the top players in the league come together via free agency in the middle of their prime does not make for an entertaining season. Yeah, it's fun to have a common villain to root against, and it's especially fun if they fail, but one team standing head and shoulders above the rest of the league from a personnel standpoint does not make for an engaging long-term experience. Back when these teams were running their respective conferences, their first and most times second round matchups didn't matter much at all, as there was usually only one team that could really challenge them. But this year, it really feels like anybody can beat anybody. If I told you any of these 9, maybe 10 teams ended up winning the championship this year, you wouldn't be able to call me crazy. I've been watching basketball religiously since I was about 10 years old, and I for one have never seen a third of the league in win now mode with at least a semi-realistic chance of winning it all. I really can't wait to see how the rest of the regular season and the playoffs ultimately unfold. I think a lot of it's going to come down to who has favorable matchups and home court advantage. This also makes the regular season more important as well because each team is going to be trying to get any advantage they can over the competition because they're so evenly matched. There isn't one team that can definitely beat the field, and I think it's amazing. In addition to the fact that there isn't one team towering over the league, it's also pretty difficult to definitively say who the best player in the world is at this moment. For as long as I can remember, there's always been one or two players that were clearly a step above the rest of their peers. Shaq and Kobe both took turns as the best player in the 2000s, then LeBron dominated pretty much all of the 2010s, with KD and Steph having their moments of glory as well. But now, it's getting really hard to say. While I do think the safest choice is Giannis, you can make arguments for at least 5, maybe 6 other players in the league, and people wouldn't think you're an idiot. At the very least, the gap between the best player and the rest of the candidates is much smaller than it has been in a very long time. And with that, guys are playing with a chip on their shoulder and trying to prove that they're the best every single night. This idea of proving yourself means so much more now as opposed to the prime LeBron and Jordan years, for example. Because even though there were other guys who may have had better individual seasons or won MVPs, when push came to shove, we all know who the best player really was. But now, there's a handful of guys fighting for that title night in and night out. Maybe in a few years there will be an obvious choice like there used to be, but at this very moment in time, it's really fun to watch everything unfold. And one more thing on this topic that I really hope I'm not jinxing, pretty much all of the top stars in the league are healthy. Yes, they've all missed games here and there this season, but it feels like this is the first time in forever where there isn't a true marquee name that's out for the year due to injury. I really hope it stays this way going forward. But aside from the best of the best, the overall talent in the league is at a place that we quite simply have never seen before. I think a good way to put it into perspective is by taking a look at how hard it's going to be an all-star reserve this season. There are these 10 starters who are all deserving of the nod and are having an incredible season, but from there, we have to pick 6 players from each conference to fill out the rest of the rosters. Looking out east, Joel Embiid is absolutely going to be picked, so that means there are 5 spots left. But with 12 of these guys putting up all-star numbers, that means 7 of them are going to be snubbed. When we look out west, it's more of the same. Ja Morant and Sabonis are both locks to make it in my opinion, leaving 4 spots remaining for these 8 players who have definitely played well enough to earn the nod. And then on top of that, there are young stars like Anthony Edwards and Paolo Banchero who aren't even being mentioned. The kind of stuff they're doing at this age is usually enough to warrant at least consideration for the All-Star team, as well as a ton of media recognition. But there's quite simply a surplus of talent in the league right now, so they're going to have to wait their turn until some of the older players eventually age out, which leads me to my next and most important point. Over the last few years, it's clear that there's been a major youth movement sweeping the NBA. With the arrival of Ja Morant, Tatum, Luka, Zion, and others, the superstars that we came to know and love are clearly on the other side of the hill. But you can't count them out just yet. Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, and LeBron James were the three main faces of the league during the 2010s, and they're still putting up otherworldly numbers on a nightly basis well into their 30s. Damian Lillard is still averaging 30 points a night. James Harden is leading the league in assists. Jimmy Butler is still a dog. And even Westbrook is having a bit of a resurgence as a sixth man. We're at such a fun point in the league right now where we're getting to see the stars of the last generation face off against the new talent the league has to offer. Normally, these kinds of matchups are lopsided in either the older or younger players' favor, but it feels like the young guys are ahead of schedule in development, while the older ones are hanging around a lot longer than we thought, which is awesome. I may be the only one, but whenever I'm bored watching NBA highlights on YouTube, I always think it's so cool when I come across videos like young Kobe facing off against MJ in 97, or LeBron versus T-Mac on Christmas in 2003, where we get to see a glimpse of the future facing off against the guys that we know as the best. And right now, we can see a matchup like this damn near every single night. Under normal circumstances, stars of the decade prior would either be towards the end of the bench or out of the league by now. But thanks to the great play of the guys I mentioned before, we get to see stuff like LeBron versus Luka, KD versus Paolo, Ja versus Steph, and many other matchups while all of these guys are still at the top of their game. It may not feel significant now, but when some kid is getting into basketball in 20 years and is taking a look at highlights of the greats, seeing these kinds of matchups is going to be so cool for them, so we should really appreciate being able to watch it live for ourselves. So to sum it all up, the ambiguity surrounding the championship favorites as well as the title for best player in the world, the overall abundance of talent around the league, and a great mix of old and new stars is why I think the NBA is perfect right now. Let me know in the comments if you guys agree with me or if you think there is a better era than the one we're in right now. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.